Hello everyone. I just wanted to make a quick video just about succulent care and planting and how to keep them living and thriving for a very long time. So thank you if you're watching on our YouTube channel. Welcome. I'm going to be real honest, I don't know anything about running a YouTube channel. This really just came about because of our kits that we started providing. Since we can't really have the classes in the greenhouse that we used to, we want to still make it possible that you guys can do some planting, have some planting therapy, and get some information. We always like to help you dust off those green thumbs and give you some tips and tricks for everything that you take home. We grow everything ourselves and we pride ourselves in that, and we also want to make sure that you feel confident taking care of it and that it lasts you all season long. And with succulents, they really can last you years and years. So we want to give you all the tools to make that happen. So if you purchase one of our containers kit, thank you so much. We hope you love it. And we're just going to give you some tips on how to plant it and then how to take care of it. For my example, I'm using a little bit different container. This happened to be one of our succulent planters. Well, it's actually Nora's, who's my sister-in-law. And I'm Allie, by the way. Sorry, Alice and Allie. I'll answer to both. And I am here in one of our greenhouses at Dutch Touch Greenhouse in Theresa. We'd love to see you here. We are open now, but of course we're keeping it limited how many people are in the greenhouse, but we hope to see all of you here very soon. But anyway, so this was one of Nora's planters that she may have neglected over the winter, but don't tell her I told you that. So I took it out and we're going to start over. So I figured I would kill two birds with one stone and show you guys how to get it planted and then have one that I needed to plant anyways. So in your kit, you should have gotten a bag of stones and a bag of soil and your succulents. And that's all you need really. So your container, when you're planting succulents, you want to have a container that has really good drainage. Now, all of the containers that we are selling right now do not have drainage holes. So we make our own drainage, and that's why you have the stones. Some people use styrofoam, some people use like mulch. You just want to have something at the bottom where the water can collect there, and then it has room to evaporate, because you don't want succulents to be sitting in the water. Their roots will rot out. So you just have to have some type of material on the bottom that's going to allow the water to evaporate, so it's not just sitting there. So we're going to take our stones, and you may have too much stone in there. I tried to gauge by the size of your container, but all you're doing, and it can be any stones. Some people really like the look of the stones that we've been putting in the kits, so they've just been using stone that they have at their house and then putting this on the top as more decorative stone. Whatever you want to do. But all I'm doing, and I have a little bit extra in here so I don't need to use all of it, is I'm just putting a thin layer on the bottom. It doesn't have to be super thick. You just want to have a thin layer so you don't see the bottom. It's covering the entire bottom. And again, that's just leaving room for the water to sit there instead of on the roots of the succulents. So you want to have some type of drainage material. If you have a container that has drainage holes, like all of our pots do, so if it has drainage holes, you don't need to worry about it. You don't need to put anything on the bottom of your planter. All of our succulents come in pots that have drainage holes. So it's up to you. When you don't have the drainage holes, you just have to be a little extra careful with watering. It's not impossible, but you just have to watch it a little bit more than when you have drainage holes. So that's just a preference, what you would like to get. And then you should have your soil. We don't have a special cactus and succulent soil. We make our own when we are planting our succulents. So I have my Batman bucket. You can tell we have kids all over this place, which I'm probably going to get interrupted by kids at least 20 times during this video, but we'll do the best we can. And we take our soil, which has really good drainage soil, and then we just add a little bit of sand in there to give it even more drainage. So if you look in our soil, we have little pieces of bulk. We have that white perlite in there, which just causes more drainage. And then we also have our sand that we add in there. So you're going to take your bag of soil. Now also the soil that is with your succulent in your pot, that's good soil too. So if you need a little extra, or if you want to save this for something else and just use the one that's coming from your pot, that's totally fine too, but we wanted to give you some new soil. So I'm going to fill this up, not all the way to the top. I want to leave a little ridge on the top because, and it looks like I got the right amount. For one thing, when you're watering in any container, you always want to have some room. So if you look, I can turn it this way. I have a little bit of a ridge because you want the water to be able to rise up and then settle down. With succulents, really the first time you water it is when you're going to really fill it with that much water. After that, you're just going to keep it moist. But anytime you put water in there, if you fill it all the way to the top, you're going to have soil spilling over. The other reason I don't fill it all the way to the top is because when you put the succulents in there and you put their root balls in there, that's going to take up more room and it's going to raise up your soil too. So you don't need it all the way to the top. Now, usually I never plant in dry soil, ever. We always like to get it wet first. That's going to take all of the air out of the soil. It's going to settle the soil, and it just makes anything that you plant in there a little bit more sturdy and stick in there. And then when you do water it, they're not going to move all over the place. So we always wet everything down before we plant in it. However, I forgot to bring the hose over here. So I do not have the hose over here. And a lot of times, when I'm planting succulents or anything in a smaller container, what I like to do is take the soil into a different container like this bucket, something with drainage. I get the soil wet first and then I put the soil in there already wet, because when you don't have drainage holes, if you put too much water in there, then it's going to take a very, very long time. You have to wait for the water to evaporate before you can start planting if you put too much in there. So what I usually like to do, I did the same thing with our terrarium class. I get the soil wet and then I just put it in there. And then once I get the succulents in there, then I water it lightly, and we'll talk about that afterwards too. So then you have this all set. You want to pick healthy succulents. So anytime I'm looking at my succulents, the first thing I'm going to look for is I'm going to look at the leaves. And there may be some, like in this one on the bottom, leaves that are kind of browning, that are, and that's okay. That's going to happen, especially when they're touching the soil. You just kind of clean that up, and we're going to talk about that later on. So that's okay if you see that. What you don't want to see is a leaf. Here's a good example. A leaf that is kind of curled up and puckering, because that means it hasn't got enough water. And if the whole succulent looks like that, it's not going to be a healthy succulent for you. The other thing you want to look for is if the leaves are very spongy and almost translucent, because they've gotten too much water, and they're not going to do well for you either. So that's the first thing you want to just inspect the leaves. Also, good thing, inspect for any bugs that you see on there too. Now you're always going to get those little like black flying ones. That's not a huge deal. But if you see, one of the biggest one is mealybug, which is like a white caterpillar fuzzy looking one. If you see that, not a healthy succulent. The other thing you want to look for is the roots. So take it out, take a look at the roots. If you take this out, like here's an example, and it doesn't have much roots on there. This one actually rooted out pretty good. Let me find a better example. Okay, so if you pull one out and it doesn't have any roots on there, or just tiny, tiny roots, again, not going to be a healthy succulent for you. So take a look at those leaves, and then also look at the roots before you plant your succulent. When you are planting, you're going to fill it with soil, and hopefully you have your succulent care sheet if you have picked up a kit, and that is what I'm going, so you can follow along on there. So then once you once you plant, you're going to take your succulent. As far as placement, it's totally up to you. Now this one is up against, it hangs on a board that Nora painted, so you're not going to really see it from the back. So I'm going to take my taller succulents and put them to the back, and then my shorter ones to the front. If you have a container like our black and white container here, and it's going to be seen from all sides, you might want to put a tall one in the center and then shorter ones around that one. Placement is just completely up to you. As far as how close succulents can be together, they can be right up next to each other. They can be pretty close. The thing then to watch for is one kind of taking over, or one getting too big, and then it may have to be transplanted into another container. If you have them spread out more and not as many in a container, they can probably stay in there longer. It's going to depend on the type of succulent and how fast it grows. When you're looking at a succulent like this guy, is going to grow a little bit slower. Our chalk sticks here can grow pretty big pretty fast. So that might be one that is going to have to be transplanted sooner. So it all depends on the speed at which, because all succulents grow differently. So I'm going to take and just make a little hole. Again, that's why I like wet soil too, because when you make the hole, it stays there, it doesn't all cave in. But I'm going to stick this one in the back, and all I'm going to do is cover up the root ball. And I don't need to push too hard. I don't need to, the less you touch the succulents, the better, really. So I'm just going to gently put that in there. When I water it, that's going to do the job of really securing it in there and covering it up. And that's what we do with all of our plants. So then I have another tall one. This is another one that's probably going to get bigger quicker, so it's probably one that we're going to have to take out first. And you don't need, all you need to do, even if you take some of the roots off, that's okay. All you need is a root ball, so you can take that extra soil off, take the extra roots off, just so you have a nice root ball. I'm going to make another hole in there, stick my succulent in there, and then just gently cover it up. You don't have to push hard on it. Again, let the water do that. It's a lot more gentle for the plant. And then I just realized that I picked some big ones. So I picked 4. I might have to go with 3 because I have this guy here. So I might have to, this is an echeveria. So I don't know if I'm going to fit my 4th one in there. And now this one has a pretty big root ball. Again, I'm going to break some of that off and make it a little bit smaller. It's not going to hurt the plant. As long as it has a root ball still attached, you're fine. It's just going to be easier to plant. So I'm going to, again, make a little hole, stick that guy in there, and gently, but make sure that it's in there. You can't just set it in there. You got to make sure it's in there and that the root ball is completely covered. You don't want that over the top. So I don't think I'm going to be able to fit my 4th guy in here. If I had some babies, I'm looking around and I don't. This guy is actually making little babies on there. If I had some little babies, I would kind of stick those in there in the empty spots, because you can fill the whole container with succulents. Again, you just have to watch it because you may have to transplant. Another thing you can do is take some of those extra stones and put those on top as decoration. You can use any stones. Some people like to put moss on there, or you can just leave it soil. You do not have to put anything on the top. The nice thing that putting the stones on there does is it stops the succulents, especially like the echeveria, which is closer to the soil. It stops it from touching the soil. And what happens when it touches the soil is those leaves will rot out a little quicker. So it is good for the succulents not to be touching. The upright succulents, you really don't have to worry about it as much. But again, you don't have to do that. That's more of a preference thing for you. So then I just put some stones in there just as kind of decoration. Some people like to put like fairy garden stuff in there too. Again, just completely up to you and what you like and how you want your container to look. So then once you have your container, you have it planted, it looks beautiful, and you want to keep it alive. You don't want it to die. So what do? How do we keep succulents alive? The number one killer of succulents is going to be watering, and usually overwatering. And everyone always asks, how often should I water my succulent container? And we never give a specific time. What you need to do is stick your finger in the soil if it feels moist at all, and really stick it in there, not just on the top. If it feels moist at all, let it go. If it feels really, really dry and you know it's been a while, then you're just going to gently water. You can use a little watering can. Some people have talked about using ice cubes. You just would probably have to water more often then. I tend to just use a little watering can and just do it really slowly and trickle the water. As far as people have asked, can you put the water on the succulents? All of our succulents get watered from the top because we have so many of them, we can't really go under each one. It really doesn't matter for most succulents. Ones that kind of have kind of like a white dusty film on, the water can take that film away, so it's really, and it doesn't hurt the plant, but it just kind of changes the look of the plant. Same with touching it. That can do that with this kind too, and succulents really don't want to be handled too much anyways. So once you get your own container, if you get water on the succulent, it's okay. Like I said, all of our succulents get watered on the top. But if you have a little container like this, it is better to kind of go underneath the leaves and just water in like that. So again, when in doubt, let it dry out. And not all the way so that it is completely shriveled up, like I said, and dead, because that's hard to come back from. But it's almost easier to come back from that than if you start to see your leaves get really squishy and translucent. That's really hard because it's retaining all of that water. It is in the cactus family. It's going to retain all of that water and rot out very easily. So that's harder to come back from. So definitely watch your watering. And once you get to know your container, you're going to get to know when it needs to be watered and how often a lot better too, because it all depends on how warm your house is. Succulents outside obviously are on a different watering schedule, which these succulents, once it gets warm out, can be moved outside, but make sure then they go into a container with drainage, obviously, because if it rains, you're gonna have issues. But they definitely can go outside and then come back in the winter. They would love it outside when it's nice and warm out there, and that kind of gets them a little bit more established too, and you might find it easier when you bring them back in that winter to overwinter them and they're more established, a little bit easier to keep alive then. Light, which we are getting some right now, which I love. They still need 4 to 6 hours of light. If they are outside, protect them from that hot afternoon sun. They don't want to be in the hot sun. If they're inside, just make sure you put them in the sunniest spot in the house, because they still need a lot of light. I know a lot of people, the nice thing about succulents is that you can have them inside, but they can't be in a dark basement. If they're in your office, you got to make sure they're still getting light from the windows. So they still need as much light as you can give them. Be careful if they're close to the window, especially in the winter, that they're not getting cold from the window, because that's another thing. Keep them away from cold drafts in the winter. They do not want to be cold, like most of us don't want to. So make sure they're still getting that light. The other thing is fertilizing. It's still a good idea to fertilize at least once a month. All of our succulents in the greenhouse actually get fertilized every single time that we water them. We use Jacks, and this is super easy. You just take 1 tablespoon with a gallon of water. So what I do is take an old milk jug, put 1 tablespoon in the milk jug, and then have that to water with once a month. If you do it more than that, it's okay. But it really does help your succulents to get fertilized at least once a month. If they're outside, they're going to need to get, and they're with drainage holes, they're going to have to get fertilized a little bit more, because it's washing through a lot quicker. So it's definitely not a ploy to sell fertilizer. When we tell everyone to fertilize their plants, you're going to see a huge difference, even with the succulents. Watching for bugs, I talked about the mealy bugs, so that's just something, especially when you're checking out your succulent, look underneath. That's where you'll find bugs. If you do, we do have a organic spray you can use, but you can also take a Q-tip and use rubbing alcohol and rub that where the bugs are, and that'll take care of them too. And it's mostly going to be like leaves that are touching the soil, that kind of will attract the bugs. If you have other plants in the house, that might, bugs might get on from that. So it's just something to look for. It's more something like with all the succulents we have that we have to watch a little bit more, but just be mindful of it. Grooming, the reason you want to groom is to keep those bugs away, because if you have decaying leaves, the bugs are going to be attracted to that. But grooming your succulent is just going to keep it healthier too. And it's going to last longer for you, and it's just something you want to watch for. Again, if you see something kind of browning or shriveling up, it's kind of like a loose tooth. You just go in there and kind of wiggle it, and if it comes off, then that's good, and get rid of it. And then temperature I talked about already. They don't like cold. Keep away from drafts, and bring inside if they're outside before the first frost. So I know that's a lot of information, so hopefully you guys, it seems more complicated than it is. Main thing is just watch the watering. Don't water too much, but don't let them get too dry. We can't resurrect them. But we always say, if you guys have any questions, email us, message us, bring your containers into the greenhouse. We are here to help, and we want your plants to last as long as possible. We have people messaging us pictures. I've gone into someone's trunk and they open it up, and I take a look at their plants in there. Because if you're struggling at all or have any questions, we are here and we want to help you. You can call us, whatever you want to do, but we want your little babies to last as long as possible. If you're just looking at you just want to keep your succulents alive, that's all the information that you need to make sure that they thrive and stay alive. Again, if you have any questions, just make sure you ask us before they're all the way dead. Like I said, we can help, but we can't resurrect. The other fun thing about succulents is propagation. So this is like next level. So if you're like, I just don't want to kill this thing, stop watching right now. But if you want to go next level, and some of your succulents are going to do this all on their own, they're going to propagate and you may not even realize it. Other ones you can take and propagate yourselves. Propagation is the process of succulents making more succulents. They're making babies. And there's not many plants that do that. They don't need anything done. They just kind of reproduce on their own. Each one is different how you can propagate it. One of the easiest ones to do is anyone that has a leaf. Ooh, and these guys are really rooted out, which is exciting. A leaf like this. So I had one of these succulents somewhere, but you can take one of the leaves off of there, and all you do, so this is Nora's propagation tray, she just took them and laid them flat. She would keep them moist, you don't want them to dry out, and then you wait. And that's the biggest thing about propagation, is the waiting. And what is going to happen is you are going to see on the end where you took it off of the mother plant, you're going to see a little baby forming, and it's going to have its own roots forming underneath the baby. Then once it gets big enough and has roots, a root system that's big enough, you're just going to take that off, because this is going to die off, and you're going to take this and you can plant it and make a whole nother succulent. So that's what you do for a lot of succulents to propagate. Some other ones like this one, you can actually take it off at a certain point, snap it off, and just stick it in the soil, and it's going to make roots and propagate all on its own. That is like one of these. And these were just stuck in the soil, and then the roots came out, and then you have a whole nother succulent to plant. There are some that are a little bit different. That's usually the general protocol for propagation. Other ones, like the hens and chicks, usually end up making little babies all on their own, and you're going to see them on this one. And all you're going to do once it gets to a good size is you are going to go in there, and I'm not going to take this one off because it's a customer's that just purchased a kit, but you're going to go in there, and there's going to be a little stem right there. You're going to gently, again like a loose tooth, wiggle it off at the base of that stem, and you're going to take that off and just stick that in the soil. Stick this stem in the soil and wait, and you're going to see roots start to form, and this is going to be its own plant. Other ones like mothers of millions have little babies on the edge of all of their leaves. They fall off on their own and they make babies everywhere, hence the name Mother of Millions. So if you want to just start out propagating, get a Mother of Millions, because you're going to feel like a propagating queen. But yeah, and other ones you'll just kind of see babies forming, and you're going to be propagating, and they can be planted into other planters or along with the planter that you already have. But that is it. So happy planting. We hope you enjoy your succulent planter. Again, thank you for getting a kit from us, and hopefully we will be back to having classes in the greenhouse, because we miss you guys and we can't wait to see you. Thank you.